The alien scientist stared at the display in disbelief. His antennae twitched in a rare sign of confusion as he analyzed the data. For years, he had studied countless species from across the galaxy, cataloging their strengths, weaknesses, and reproductive cycles. His research had taken him to planets in the farthest reaches of space, studying beings who lived in icy wastelands, those who thrived in scorching deserts, and even creatures that could withstand the crushing depths of gas giants. Yet, nothing prepared him for the discovery he had just made. He had come to Earth to study a young species, one he had initially thought would be no more significant than the others he had studied. The humans. They were primitive, still working with rudimentary technology compared to the advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Their home planet was far from perfect. Yet now, as he stared at the data, the numbers did not lie. Humans were unique in a way no other species had ever been before. They were the most fertile creatures in the galaxy. He muttered to himself in disbelief. Impossible. No species should be able to reproduce at this rate. It wasn't just that humans had high birth rates, which in itself wasn't so unusual. What was staggering was the speed at which they evolved, adapted, and thrived. In the short span of a few centuries, humans had expanded across their planet, from the depths of the oceans to the highest peaks, building civilizations in places where no other species could survive. Their ability to adapt was unparalleled. They could thrive in extreme environments, changing themselves to fit the conditions around them. From creating technology that defied the laws of physics to mastering biological processes that most other species could only dream of, the alien scientist leaned forward, his large, multifaceted eyes scanning the data once more, still unable to grasp the full implications. He wasn't alone in his study. Other members of his species had traveled to Earth before, observing the humans with mild curiosity, but none had ever realized how quickly they were evolving. None had foreseen the day when humanity would be in a position to challenge the dominant species in the galaxy. It wasn't just their adaptability that was the problem. It was their relentless drive to expand. For years, his species had kept a close watch on Earth, observing the humans from a distance, cautiously studying their every move. Yet, no matter how many times they tried to intervene, no matter how many strategies they devised to slow them down, humans always seemed to find a way to move forward. But it wasn't just the aliens who were noticing. As the humans' technological advancements accelerated, they began to attract the attention of other species in the galaxy. Some were curious, others were wary, and a few were outright terrified. The humans, despite their relatively short history in the grand timeline of the galaxy, were starting to make waves. The scientists could see it now. The humans were no longer just an isolated species on a tiny blue planet. They were about to take their first steps beyond their world, and that was something that could not be allowed to happen. Suddenly, an alarm sounded, shaking him from his thoughts. The screen in front of him flickered, revealing a message in a language he recognized but rarely used. It was a distress signal from a ship, a human vessel. The message was fragmented, but the meaning was clear. They were under attack. Without thinking, the scientist slammed his fist against the console, his mind racing. His species had known for some time that conflict was inevitable, but this was different. Humans, it seemed, were not content to simply observe the galaxy from their own planet. They had begun to venture out. They had begun to challenge the established order. The distress signal was growing fainter by the second, but there was something else hidden within it. Something the scientist hadn't anticipated. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were fighting with an intensity he had never seen before. Their ships, though primitive in comparison to those of other advanced species, were carrying out precise maneuvers that were baffling his mind. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but their will to survive, their desperate drive, was unlike anything the scientist had ever encountered. In that moment, he understood. This was no ordinary species. The humans were not only capable of reproducing faster than any other known species, but they were also capable of fighting harder, thinking smarter, and surviving against all odds. They were not the weakest link in the chain of life in the galaxy, as he had once thought. They were the most dangerous. A chill ran down the scientist's spine as he realized the true magnitude of what was unfolding. The war had begun, and the humans weren't just playing the game, they were rewriting the rules. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to become the most dominant force in the galaxy. And from the looks of it, no one would be able to stop them. With a sense of dread settling in his chest, the scientist began to wonder if the galaxy itself was ready for what was coming. Could any species truly withstand the relentless growth of humanity? Would they become the new rulers of the galaxy, or would they be wiped out in the chaos that was surely to follow? One thing was clear: the humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were a force to be reckoned with. And this was only the beginning. Asterisk. The ship groaned under the strain of the unexpected assault. Inside, the humans fought with an intensity that only desperation could fuel. Captain Lavra Hawk's mind raced as she issued commands to her crew, her voice calm, though her heart pounded in her chest. Their ship, the Vanguard, was no match for the overwhelming firepower of the alien fleet that had descended upon them. "Status report," Captain Hawk shouted, gripping the controls with both hands as a violent shake rocked the ship. "Shields are at 30%, Captain," Lieutenant Fisher called out from his station. "Hull integrity's dropping, but we're still in the fight. Keep her together, Fisher," she ordered, her voice hard with determination. She could feel the weight of every second, every choice, knowing that they were at the edge of survival. The enemy ships were faster, more advanced, and they were relentless. The humans' desperate attempts to break free of their own atmosphere, to escape their homeworld and explore the stars, had only drawn the attention of those who had been watching them from the shadows. But what they didn't know was that the humans were no strangers to fighting against the odds. It was in their nature to keep pushing forward, to find a way when there seemed to be none. Even as the Vanguard was battered by incoming fire, her crew fought back, using every trick they knew to survive. "Target their engines," Captain Hawk ordered, watching the display in front of her. "We need to cripple their fleet. It's our only chance." Lieutenant Fisher's fingers flew over his controls. "Aye, Captain, locking on." The ship shuddered again as the weapon systems powered up. The humans' technology was still crude in many ways, but it had one advantage over the alien systems: unpredictability. Human engineers, in their scramble to catch up to the rest of the galaxy, had created a patchwork of technologies that were often clunky but capable of surprising the enemy when used correctly. "Firing!" Fisher called out, a sense of hope tinging his voice. For the first time in minutes, the Vanguard's cannons fired, sending a series of bright bolts racing toward the nearest alien ship. One of the blasts struck home, causing the enemy ship to lurch violently, its shields flickering before they collapsed entirely. The crew of the Vanguard cheered for a moment, their spirits lifted by the small victory. But Captain Hawk's mind didn't have time for celebration. "All ships, make your escape," she ordered, even as another barrage of enemy fire slammed into Vanguard, causing the ship to groan once more. "We need to get out of here before they regroup." Her orders rang out across the comms, reaching the other human vessels that had managed to scramble into the fight. Their forces were small, a ragtag fleet of ships cobbled together with hastily assembled technology. But the humans' will to fight burned brighter than the alien forces had expected. They had come to Earth thinking they could quickly snuff out this fledgling species, but the humans were proving that they were not so easily defeated. "Captain, we've got incoming," Fisher warned, his voice rising in urgency. A new wave of alien ships entered the fray, their weapons trained on the human ships. The vanguard was outnumbered and outgunned, but still, Hawk felt something stirring deep within her. They couldn't stop now. Earth's future depended on this battle. "We're not going down without a fight," Captain Hawk yelled, her voice echoing across the ship. "Brace for impact." Another hit rocked the ship, this time from the side. Sparks flew from the console next to her, and the lights flickered momentarily. The vanguard was taking damage, but it was still flying. "And that was enough. Report," Hawk snapped. "We've lost communication with the fleet, Captain." Fisher replied, his face pale as he read the data. "Most of our ships are gone. Only a few are still fighting, and they're surrounded." The reality of their situation began to set in. The humans were losing the fight. And yet, something about the way they fought, the unyielding nature of their resistance, sparked a strange sense of respect in the alien scientist who had been quietly observing from afar. From his hidden position aboard an alien warship, the scientist's sensors flickered as they scanned the human fleet's progress. He had expected to witness a quick extermination, a minor blip in the grand history of the galaxy. Instead, what he saw was a race against time, a struggle that defied his predictions. He couldn't help but marvel at the tenacity of the humans. The idea that they would fight so hard, even knowing they were vastly outnumbered, was something that no other species had ever done with such fervor. In his many years of research, he had never encountered a species like this. "What is it about them?" he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. They are not supposed to be this strong. It doesn't make sense." He paused, staring at the data before him, a realization dawning in his mind. It wasn't just their fertility or adaptability that made the humans stand out. It was their relentless drive. The humans did not give up. They had come from nothing, built themselves up from the ashes of a war-torn world, and now they were fighting to survive in a galaxy that was far from welcoming. But as the battle waged on, something else began to worry the scientist. The humans were evolving faster than any species he had ever documented, not only in their ability to adapt biologically, but also in how quickly they could learn and use new technologies. If left unchecked, this could mean disaster for the established order of the galaxy. A sudden, sharp beeping interrupted his thoughts. His hands flew over the controls, sending a new order to the fleet. There was no more room for hesitation. The humans were not just a threat. They were a ticking time bomb. That the scientist leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had underestimated them once. He wouldn't make that mistake again. But would it be too late? The humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were a force that couldn't be ignored. And as the vanguard and the rest of the human fleet fought on, the galaxy itself would soon realize that the humans were a new kind of power, and that their war for survival was just beginning. The alien warship's engines rumbled as it surged forward, its sleek metallic hull cutting through the black void of space. Inside the command center, the scientist stood before a massive holographic map, watching as human ships fought against impossible odds. His antennae twitched in agitation. His earlier conclusions, the ones that led him to underestimate the humans, now seemed like glaring mistakes. "Too reckless," he muttered under his breath. "I should have seen this coming. They're learning faster than we can react." His thoughts raced. The humans had been fighting for survival, but their actions suggested something or something deeper. The alien scientist had watched them closely for years, cataloging their species, but he'd missed one crucial detail: humanity's ability to think, adapt, and act as a united force in ways that most other species could not even comprehend. They had faced extinction before, and each time they had come back stronger. But this time, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting back. And now, the war was no longer just about Earth. As the battle raged across the stars, human ships were retaliating with an intensity that was unrelenting. The aliens had been arrogant in their calculations, assuming that humanity would never rise above their primitive beginnings. Now the humans were proving otherwise. It was a fight for their future, not just as a species, but as an emerging power. In the galaxy. On the Vanguard, Captain Hawk watched the carnage unfold before her eyes. The alien fleet had regrouped, and their weapons were heavier, more advanced. The battle had shifted. What was once a skirmish for survival had now turned into a war of attrition. They were losing. Slowly but surely they were losing. And yet, there was something in the air. Something that wouldn't let her give up. "Captain," Fisher's voice rang out over the comms. "We've got multiple breaches on Deck 3. We can't hold much longer." Captain Hawk's face hardened. "Get the damage control teams down there. We'll hold. Keep firing and keep moving." A deep rumble shook the Vanguard as another round of enemy fire slammed into the ships. Aft, the crew scrambled to maintain control, but it was clear they were running out of options. Their fleet was dwindling, and with each passing minute, the alien forces grew bolder, their attacks more coordinated. Despite everything, though, there was a sense of something deeper in the humans, an instinct, perhaps, or a drive that wouldn't let them quit. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to win. "Captain, we've got a distress signal from another human fleet," Fisher said, his voice strained. "They've breached the enemy's line. They're requesting reinforcements." Captain Hawk took a deep breath, her knuckles white as they gripped the controls. The decision was immediate, clear. "We go to them. All hands, prepare for a full-throttle assault." The Vanguard shifted, its damaged engines sputtering but managing to propel the ship forward. They were still outnumbered, but now they had something the aliens didn't, a tenacity that refused to be extinguished. The human fleet was not backing down. Instead, it was rallying, despite the losses, despite the overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, on the command ship of the alien fleet, the scientist watched in growing concern. He had underestimated the human spirit, something he couldn't have predicted. It wasn't just their adaptability, their fertility, or their rapid evolution that had made them unique. It was their resilience. In the face of annihilation, humans didn't fall apart, they rose. And if they kept this up, they might just succeed in the impossible, defeating a far more advanced force. As the human fleet prepared for their final push, the scientists made a fateful decision. The humans' rapid evolution, their survival instinct, and their ability to unite against insurmountable odds made them unpredictable, but they also made them dangerous. He couldn't afford to watch any longer. The risk of humanity's victory was too great. His hands trembled as he activated the fleet's main communication channel. "This ends now," the scientist muttered. The alien fleet, now in full formation, made its move. A massive wave of ships cutting across the stars toward the remaining human vessels. It seemed impossible that the humans could make it through. But the humans, desperate and determined, fought back with everything they had left. The Vanguard was barely holding together, yet the crew fought with every ounce of their energy, refusing to give up. Captain Hawk's mind raced. They were still outnumbered, but the human fighters weren't retreating. They were adapting to the alien tactics, learning from every encounter, every near miss. And then, a breakthrough came, a flicker of hope, a sudden shift in the enemy fleet's formation. A gap had opened. The alien forces had underestimated the ability of the human fleet to counter their strategy. It was small, a fleeting moment, but it was enough. Now, Captain Hawk barked, her voice unwavering as she gave the order for all human ships to surge forward. Push through. The human fleet surged forward, launching everything they had in a final, all-out assault on the now vulnerable alien command ships. The Vanguard led the charge, its engines screaming in protest, but its weapons firing with newfound ferocity. Every shot counted, every maneuver calculated to perfection. As the alien warships began to fall one by one, The scientist felt something deep within him, a growing dread. He had underestimated the humans, and now their victory was within reach. It wasn't just about their strength or their will to survive. It was about their ability to evolve and adapt. The galaxy was witnessing something new, something that had never been seen before, a species that had been pushed to the brink but refused to fall. The tide was turning. And with it, the scientist realized that the humans, despite all their flaws, were a force that could not be ignored. They had a potential that could change the very balance of power in the galaxy. The scientist took a deep breath, his mind racing. His species had been wrong to underestimate humanity. Now the galaxy would see just how dangerous they could be. And as the battle raged on, it became clear, humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The battle outside raged on, the stars themselves seemingly blotted out by the clash of titanic forces. Human ships, battered but unyielding, fought back against the alien onslaught with a desperation that fueled their every move. The alien fleet, once sure of its victory, was now in disarray. Their perfect strategy had been shattered by a species they had considered too primitive to pose any real threat. Inside the vanguard, Captain Hawk's heart hammered in her chest. The battle had become personal. Each strike, each maneuver was a message to the aliens. Humanity would not be subjugated. Not today, not ever. Captain, Fisher's voice crackled through the comms. We've breached their main hull. We're in. Good work, Lieutenant, Captain Hawk said, her voice tight but filled with resolve. Keep pushing. We need to take their command ship. It's the only way we can end this. The Vanguard had taken severe damage, but it was still in one piece. The crew, though exhausted, fought like cornered animals. They knew that this was their only chance to win. If they failed, Earth would be lost, and the galaxy would become a place where humans were nothing more than a footnote in history. As the Vanguard's engines sputtered toward the alien flagship, the reality of the situation settled over Hawk. They were going to have to board the ship and infiltrate its heart. It was a risky move, but it was the only chance they had left. They couldn't afford another skirmish. This was the final strike. The alien warship loomed before them, a dark monolith in space. Its size was overwhelming, dwarfing the Vanguard by several times. Yet, the humans would not turn away. All hands, prepare for boarding, Captain Hawk ordered, her voice steady but sharp. This is our last chance. Make it count. The Vanguard lurched as it docked with the alien flagship, the airlock seals hissing into place. Captain Hawk and her team of elite soldiers quickly suited up, preparing for what was sure to be a brutal fight. They would breach the alien vessel, disable its core systems, and take control. If they succeeded, it would be the turning point of the war. But as the door to the airlock hissed open, and the team prepared to storm the enemy ship, something unexpected happened. The air around them seemed to pulse, a strange energy filling the atmosphere. The scientist, watching from a hidden command station on the alien flagship, felt his antennae twitch in confusion as the human soldiers entered the alien vessel. He wasn't sure what he was witnessing, but there was something about their presence that seemed off. They moved with a precision that was impossible for a species that had only recently developed spacefaring technology. Their tactical coordination was near flawless, like they were instinctively connected to the battle, to each other. He quickly accessed the feed from the alien vessel's internal sensors, watching as the human soldiers took down guards with ruthless efficiency. It wasn't just their technology that was surprising, it was their sheer will to win. The unspoken unity that tied them together, even under the most extreme pressure. The scientist's heart raced. These humans were unlike anything he had seen before. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting with a purpose, with the kind of determination that could topple the most powerful forces in the galaxy. This was no ordinary fight for them. This was their chance to rewrite the rules of the universe, and he wasn't sure if he could stop them. On the alien flagship, Captain Hawk and her team continued their advance. They moved through the dark corridors, encountering resistance at every turn. Alien soldiers, taller and stronger than humans, threw themselves at the invaders, but the humans kept pressing forward, unrelenting. Clear the corridor. Hawk barked, leading the charge. Her team fired their weapons, cutting down the alien guards as they moved swiftly through the hallways. As they approached the heart of the alien ship, where the command center awaited, a strange noise echoed through the walls. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, more ominous. The sound of something closing in on them. Captain Hawk's instincts screamed at her. Something wasn't right. "Captain, there's something in the next chamber," Fisher warned, his eyes wide as he studied his screen. "I can't identify it, but it's big." Hawk nodded, signaling to the team. "Get ready. We don't know what we're walking into." The door to the command center slid open, and the humans rushed in, weapons raised, ready for anything. But what they saw stopped them cold. In the center of the room stood a massive dark figure. It wasn't alien. It wasn't human either. The creature towered over them, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and its body pulsated with a strange energy. The scientist's eyes widened as he saw the creature on the screen. He knew what it was. It was a bioengineered weapon, designed by his people to keep the galaxy's dominant species in line. And it was one of the most dangerous creations his kind had ever made. "Get back!" Hawk shouted, but it was too late. The creature lunged forward with terrifying speed, its massive claws swiping through the air. The team fired, but their weapons did little to slow it down. The creature was too powerful, too fast. For a moment, the human soldiers were thrown into chaos, desperately trying to regroup. But then, Captain Hawk did something unexpected. She charged forward, moving faster than any of her team members had ever seen. She dove beneath the creature's swipe and planted a grenade at its feet. "Fisher now!" she shouted. Lieutenant Fisher's eyes went wide. He hit the trigger. The grenade exploded in a deafening roar, sending shockwaves through the room. The creature screamed in agony, thrashing wildly, but it was clear, it was too late. The explosion had done its job. The beast collapsed to the ground, its body writhing. In death throes, Captain Hawk breathed heavily, her chest heaving as she looked around at the wreckage. The alien flagship had been breached, and with it, their grip on this war. The humans had struck a blow that would be felt across the galaxy. But as she caught her breath and surveyed the fallen creature, a chilling thought crossed her mind. If humanity could face such horrors and still survive, what else might they be capable of? Back on the alien warship, the scientist stared at the footage in stunned silence. He had underestimated them again. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were becoming something far more dangerous, a force that could not be stopped. The dust had barely settled after the battle within the alien flagship when Captain Hawk and her team made their way to the heart of the ship. The command center was now theirs, but the cost had been high. The creature they had fought had nearly torn them apart. Still, they had prevailed, and that was all that mattered. Now, with the alien ship under their control, it was time to end this war. Captain Hawk stood in front of the ship's command console, her fingers hovering over the controls. Her mind raced with possibilities. They had won a battle, yes, but the war was far from over. She had no illusions that defeating the aliens would be easy. They were still outnumbered, their fleet in shambles, and the aliens would surely retaliate. But there was something she felt deep in her gut, a quiet, undeniable certainty. The humans had the will to survive. And if they could just hold on a little longer, they might turn the tide of this war. "Fisher, status report," she ordered, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. Lieutenant Fisher was working furiously at a nearby terminal, his eyes scanning the alien data streams. "Captain, their fleet is still regrouping. But we've gained control of their command ship's central systems. It's ours now, but we're not alone. We're still getting scattered communications from their other ships, but they're consolidating. Consolidating? You mean they're planning another attack? Captain Hawk asked, her eyebrows furrowing. Fisher nodded grimly. They'll come at us again, Captain. I'm sure of it. The weight of his words hung in the air. They had taken one of their flagship vessels, but the war was far from won. The alien forces had underestimated the humans, and now they were learning from their mistakes. The alien species might have superior technology, but they had one glaring flaw. They were not prepared for the one thing that separated humans from the rest of the galaxy. The human spirit. Captain Hawk took a deep breath, tapping the console with her fingers in a quick rhythm. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're going after them. A few moments of silence passed as Fisher and the rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. This was a bold decision, perhaps too bold. But Hawk knew they couldn't sit idle and let the aliens regroup. If they did, they would lose their momentum. The war was too crucial. Humanity's future was too fragile. Prepare the fleet, Captain Hawk ordered, her voice firm. We're going on the offensive. We'll hit their supply lines first. Then cripple their fleet. We'll take the fight to them. Fisher hesitated before nodding. Understood, Captain. We're going to need a lot more firepower for that kind of operation. We've got what we need, she said, a fire in her eyes. And if we don't, we'll make it. Meanwhile, aboard the alien warship, the scientist was in a state of deep contemplation. He couldn't stop replaying the events that had unfolded. In the past hours, the humans had defied every expectation. The creature they had unleashed had been their last line of defense, but it had failed. And now the humans were taking control of their flagship, using it against them. For the first time since the war began, the scientist was unsure of his species' victory. It wasn't just that the humans were strong, they were resilient in a way he had never seen before. It was as if every defeat, every loss, only fueled their desire to fight harder. It was terrifying in a way. The alien scientist had spent his life studying life forms across the galaxy, analyzing their potential, their strengths, their weaknesses. And yet, the humans had somehow slipped under his radar. They weren't supposed to be capable of such rapid adaptation. They weren't supposed to be able to turn their losses into victories. They weren't supposed to grow so quickly. I need more data, the scientist muttered, pacing in front of his console. His mind spun, seeking answers he couldn't find. There has to be something that explains them. He quickly ordered a deeper scan of the human fleet, trying to find any patterns or weaknesses he could exploit. What he found, however, only deepened his confusion. Every scan, every attempt to penetrate their systems, showed the same thing, a species that was constantly evolving. Their technology, though primitive by galactic standards, was growing at an exponential rate. More troubling was their unity. The human fleet, despite its ragtag nature and scattered ships, fought together as if they were one organism, each ship supporting the other, each fighter knowing exactly where to strike, when to retreat, when to push forward. The humans' greatest weapon wasn't their firepower, their ships, or even their adaptability. It was their unity. It was the way they fought, the way they thought as one. The scientist understood now. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to dominate, and the galaxy would be forced to face the consequences of underestimating them. Back on the Vanguard, Captain Hawk and her team had prepared for their next strike. The alien flagship, still under their control, was now a tool for humanity's fight. The human fleet had rallied, and the remaining ships gathered around the commandeered vessel, ready for whatever came next. Captain Hawk looked out into the void of space, her thoughts racing. The battles they had fought up to this point had been nothing more than a beginning. The real challenge was just ahead. But with every passing minute, the humans proved themselves more than capable of facing it. The Vanguard's engines roared to life, its guns ready for battle. "Let's end this," Captain Hawk muttered, her voice steely. She turned to her crew. "Prepare for a full assault. We go for their supply lines first, then we hit them with everything we've got. No mercy." The crew was silent for a moment, then they nodded, steeling themselves for what was to come. "Ready when you are, Captain," Fisher said, his voice calm but filled with determination. Captain Hawk felt a surge of pride. She had led her people to this moment, but she wasn't leading them alone. She was part of something bigger, a fight that would define humanity's place in the galaxy, and she knew, with certainty, that whatever came next, humanity would not falter. They had already proven that. The Vanguard cut through the cold void of space, its engines roaring as it led the charge against the alien forces. Captain Hawk stood at the bridge, her eyes fixed on the display in front of her. The alien fleet, still reorganizing after their unexpected losses, was now the target of a human force determined to win. The Vanguard's hull, battered but sturdy, pulsed with life. It was a symbol of humanity's refusal to give up. "Captain," Fisher's voice broke through her thoughts, "we've identified their primary supply route. It's a heavily guarded corridor, but it's the weak point we need to hit." "Good, that's where we're going," Hawk said, her voice steady and filled with purpose. "We can't afford to wait any longer. We have to strike now." The alien forces were far from helpless, but their supply lines were their Achilles heel. If the humans could sever their resources, they could cripple the alien war machine. Hawk knew this was a bold move, but it was their best chance. "Captain," Lieutenant Fisher said, a hint of hesitation in his voice, "our ships are ready, but we're outnumbered. We'll be fighting their full force." "I know," Captain Hawk replied, "but we have something they don't have, the will to win. And we're not alone. We've rallied the best humanity has to offer. This is our moment." The human fleet moved in formation, the ships spread out across the vast expanse of space. They were a mix of military vessels, civilian ships retrofitted for battle, and even makeshift fleets formed from the wreckage of earlier battles. Each ship was different, but they all shared one thing: the desire to protect their home, to ensure humanity's future. They were more than just a scattered fleet. They were a symbol of unity. As the fleet approached the alien supply route, the first wave of enemy ships appeared, cutting through the dark expanse. They were vast, ominous, and imposing, their weapons primed for another devastating strike. Yet, this time, the humans were prepared. They had learned from every skirmish, every battle. They knew how the aliens moved, how they thought, and they were ready to turn that knowledge against them. "Here they come," Fisher said, his voice tight as he watched the incoming alien ships. "All ships, brace for impact," Captain Hawk commanded. "We'll fight for every inch, but we'll take that route, no matter what." The first few seconds of the battle were chaos. Weapons fire lit up the dark space, the bright flashes of energy bursts clashing with the stark black backdrop. The human ships fired back with everything they had, their lasers cutting through the alien defenses, their cannons blasting through shields. Yet, despite their tenacity, the human ships were still outgunned. The alien ships were faster, more advanced, and more heavily armed. But the humans had one advantage the aliens hadn't expected: creativity. The aliens had relied on their superior technology and overwhelming force to crush their enemies, but humanity had learned to adapt quickly, to think outside the box. "Prepare to flank them," Hawk ordered. "All ships, use the asteroid field for cover. We'll blindside them." In a daring move, the human fleet dove into a nearby asteroid field, their ships weaving between the massive rocks as they closed in on the alien ships. The aliens tried to track the humans, but the debris field made their targeting systems useless. For the first time, the tables were turned. The alien fleet, caught off guard by the humans' unexpected maneuver, hesitated. That hesitation was All the humans needed. The fleet emerged from the field in a synchronized strike, their weapons firing in unison, blasting through the first wave of alien ships with precision. It was a flawless assault, one that had the aliens scrambling to regroup. The scientist, watching the unfolding events from his observation post, felt his heart race. The humans were using tactics he hadn't anticipated. Tactics that exploited the very weaknesses his species had overlooked. Their ability to adapt, to find new ways of fighting, was proving to be their most dangerous weapon. The alien ships that had once been seen as unstoppable were now being torn apart by the humans' relentless pursuit. He knew his species could not afford to lose this war. If the humans continued to gain ground, they would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But even as the scientist watched the chaos unfold, he realized something else. It wasn't just their military strategies that made the humans dangerous. It was their unity, their unwavering commitment to one another, that gave them the strength to press on even when the odds were stacked against them. On the battlefield, Captain Hawk felt the weight of each decision, each command. The human fleet was pushing forward, but they weren't done yet. The supply lines still had to be severed, and there were more alien ships on the way. They had won the first wave, but the real test was still ahead. "Keep the pressure on," Hawk ordered, her voice steady. "We've got them on the run. Now we finish it." As the human fleet surged forward, they unleashed everything they had in a final, coordinated assault. The alien ships faltered, their defenses crumbling under the relentless barrage of human firepower. The supply route that had been so vital to the alien fleet's strength was slowly being destroyed, ship by ship, until the final blow came. With a resounding explosion, the last of the alien supply ships was obliterated. A wave of silence followed, broken only by the hum of the human ships as they held their position. The alien fleet, now severely weakened and scattered, began to retreat. The humans had done it. They had struck a decisive blow, one that would cripple the alien war machine. For a brief moment, Captain Hawk allowed herself a small, hard-earned smile. They had won this battle, but the war wasn't over. It was just one step closer to their ultimate victory. "We've done it," Fisher said, his voice full of awe. "We actually did it." But Hawk knew better than to celebrate too soon. The aliens were resilient, and they would regroup. This was just the beginning of a much larger conflict, one that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. "I wouldn't celebrate just yet, Lieutenant," she said, her tone hardening. "The war isn't over. Not by a long shot. We've got more to do." As the human fleet regrouped and prepared for the next phase of the war, the scientist continued his analysis of the data. The humans had just taken their first major victory, but he knew the conflict was far from over. However, a seed of doubt had been planted in his mind. He had witnessed something in the humans that had never been seen before, a species that could rise above their limitations, that could take on the galaxy's most powerful forces and survive. And if the humans were truly capable of that, the galaxy would never be the same again. The calm after the storm was fleeting. The silence that followed the human victory over the alien supply route was heavy, almost suffocating. Captain Hawk stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, staring into the void of space, her mind racing with the implications of their latest triumph. They had crippled the alien fleet, destroyed their vital supply lines, and secured a much-needed victory. But victory was a fragile thing in war. She knew better than to allow herself the luxury of resting on their laurels. "Report, Hawk." Sighed, her voice sharp, cutting through the tense quiet. "Captain," Fisher replied from his station, "we've done it. The alien supply routes are down, and their fleet is scattered. But we've received transmissions from other factions. In the galaxy, the word is spreading. The humans have struck a decisive blow." Hawk's eyes narrowed. She had expected this. The aliens were part of a larger galactic network, and while they had been the dominant force, they had allies. Allies who might come to their aid, or worse, join in to finish the job. She'd seen the way the aliens had reacted after their defeat, gritting their teeth, pulling their forces back, but they hadn't given up. "Who's coming?" Hawk asked, already bracing for bad news. Fisher tapped a few keys on his console. "Reports indicate that several alien factions have begun rallying. The Vorga, the Thraxians, and the Zephyr, they've all sent reinforcements. We're looking at a coordinated counteroffensive." Hawk's jaw clenched. Reinforcements from some of the galaxy's most ruthless species. It was exactly what she had feared. Their victory had drawn attention, and not all of it was friendly. "We need to move fast," she said, turning to face her crew. "Get the Vanguard ready to lead the charge again. We're not running. We're hitting them before they can regroup." "Captain," Fisher hesitated, glancing at the tactical display. "There's a new development. The alien fleet we just defeated, their command ship was completely destroyed, but it looks like they're sending something else. It's big. Too big." Captain Hawk's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by too big?" Fisher didn't answer immediately, his fingers flying across the screen, trying to gather more information. Finally, his voice was grim. "It's not just another ship, Captain. It's something entirely different. I've never seen anything like it. It's a mobile battle station, capable of controlling an entire fleet from one central location. It's like a fortress, a weapon, and a command center all in one." Hawk's mind raced. This wasn't just a counteroffensive, it was an escalation. The aliens were pulling out their trump card, hoping to end this fight in one devastating stroke. She could feel the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This would be the defining battle. If they failed, humanity's chance at survival would be gone. "Can we take it down?" Hawk asked, her voice taut with determination. Fisher looked at her, his face grim but resolute. "I don't know, Captain. This is unlike anything we've ever faced before. Its shields are almost impenetrable, and its weapons are capable of wiping out entire fleets in seconds. It's a walking nightmare. Then we destroy it," Hawk said, her voice unwavering. "We've come too far to back down now. We've beaten them before. We'll do it again. But we need every ship in our fleet, every hand on deck. Get the word out. Rally the remaining forces. We strike now, or we lose everything." On the alien command ship, the scientist had watched the humans' last assault with growing dread. Their victory had been unexpected, but the humans relentless. Nature had caught even the most advanced alien species off guard. Now, with their supply lines shattered and their fleet in disarray, the scientist people were relying on their final weapon, the mobile battle station. The scientist was alone in his study, staring at the massive holographic map of the battlefield. He could see the human fleet moving, preparing for their next attack. They were acting with more precision, more coordination than he had ever imagined possible. He couldn't deny it anymore. Humanity was evolving faster than he could keep up with. He ran his hands over his face, a mixture of frustration and awe flooding him. Why do they fight like this? What drives them? He muttered to himself. What makes them so different? He'd spent years studying species across the galaxy, and none had ever displayed the same level of unity, the same burning desire to protect and fight for their survival. Humanity was an anomaly, a species that refused to lie down, no matter how often they were struck down. He knew that the mobile battle station, the Revenant, would be humanity's greatest challenge. But even as he keyed in the final commands, to ready the station for battle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more profound was happening. The humans were changing the course of the galaxy, whether anyone liked it or not. The Vanguard was ready. Hawk's fleet, smaller but growing stronger with each passing moment, had prepared for the battle to end all battles. The mobile battle station, Revenant, was approaching, its massive form darkening the stars as it neared the human fleet's position. "Captain, the Revenant is closing in," Fisher warned, his voice tinged with tension. "It's moving fast, and it's got an armada of ships flanking it." "I see it," Hawk replied, her tone steely. "We take down its shields first. Everything we have, all at once. The moment they falter, we move in for the kill." The human fleet closed in on the Revenant, firing everything they had. Laser beams, missiles, and everything in between hit the battle station shields. For a moment, it looked like the alien weapon would hold strong, its shields absorbing everything the humans could throw at it. But then, something unexpected happened. The Revenant's shields began to flicker, as if they were struggling to keep up with the barrage. The humans had found a weakness, a small chink in the armor. The Revenant wasn't invincible. "We've got a window," Captain Hawk shouted. "Now! All ships, concentrate fire on that spot." The human fleet fired with everything they had. The energy beams cracked against the Revenant's defenses, and with a deafening explosion, the shield generators gave way. The battle station's core was now exposed. "Now, Captain," Fisher yelled, his hands dancing over his console. "We've breached their defenses." Full assault. The human fleet surged forward, a wave of ships closing in on the Revenant with terrifying speed. As the Vanguard led the charge, Captain Hawk could feel the adrenaline surging through her veins. They were so close. This was the moment they had been fighting for. This was humanity's chance to take down the largest weapon ever created by the alien forces. With a final, decisive push, the Vanguard's cannons fired. The Revenant exploded in a burst of light, its massive form shattering into pieces. The alien fleet, now without its central command, faltered and began to break apart as the debris from the battle station scattered into the void. Hawk's heart hammered in her chest. They had done it. The humans had triumphed. They had defeated the alien forces once and for all. On the Vanguard, Captain Hawk looked out into the stars. The war was over. Humanity had not only survived, they had thrived. The galaxy would remember this day. The day humanity rose and nothing would ever be the same again. For the first time, the scientist aboard the alien warship saw what had been hidden from him all along. The humans were not a species to be feared or destroyed. They were a species to be reckoned with, a force of nature. And now they were ready to take their place among the stars.